All right, everybody, let's get started. Call this meeting to order. We'll pledge allegiance. Nick, would you like to?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any comments from the public today? Seeing none, let's move on. Any corrections to the agenda or consent? I asked that question out when Paul had a mouthful of coffee there. You want to pull something, right, Paul?
Yeah, we want to pull the only action item, item A. There's another option we'd like to explore before bringing that back.
Okay, we're going to pull 7A. Anything else? Very good. Do we have a motion on the agenda? Let's just take a motion on the agenda right now. So moved. Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any public comment on that? Okay. There it is. Magic. Okay, on consent, any board members want to pull any item for discussion? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any public comment? Very good, let's call the question. All right, so we don't have any consent items brought forward. So let's go with the presentation. California Special Districts Association Transparency Certificate.
Hey, good afternoon, board members, staff, community. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Dane Wadley. I'm a field coordinator with the California Special Districts Association. The liaison to special districts, as I'm sure you're aware, your districts have been a member of CSDA for quite some time, and we certainly appreciate that. But here today on behalf of the Special District Leadership Foundation, which is basically the foundation arm of CSDA, and the SDLF does a number of recognition, kind of good governance programs for special districts, whether it be staff or districts, and of course, reason I'm for you guys being here is with you guys earning the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence once again for the fourth time. So there's basically a renewal process that the district has to go through every 3 years now. So I'd like to just go into a little bit of background on the program itself, some of the particulars of how you actually earn it, if you don't mind, and then obviously just a couple of remarks I'd like to make as well, and definitely get a picture afterwards. So. The certificate program was created in 2013, and proud to say too, the district was one of our kind of the initiators of being involved in that program in terms of you guys got your certificate a year later in 2014 for the first time, and continued to, of course, renew that, as I said, all the way up to today. And I was talking with Melanie as I came in earlier, and I do these presentations quite frequently for districts in my region, and there's maybe a couple other ones, maybe 3 other districts that I've done that have earned it as many times as you guys. So certainly kudos to the board members for making it a priority, and certainly to staff as well, for Melanie and Shannon, my understanding, who did the lion's share of the work to actually get all the checklist items that need to be checked off, because it is, as like the CSDA, we kind of make a little joke, it's not just putting up a website or throwing something out there and then you're good. It's much more involved than that. To actually earn the certificate. So to that end, there's 3 kind of subject areas that you have to meet during the certificate. There's your basic transparency requirements, your ethics trainings for you as the board members, filing all your reports to the state controller's office, etc. Secondly, there are website requirements, so your board meeting schedules, your budgets, your audits, rosters, etc. that has to be on your website. And then finally, there's outreach requirements. So you have to have like a regular district newsletter, have annual informational public budget meetings. So there's getting a sense, I think, of the rigorous nature of the program. And it's also something that we keep kind of adding things to it as well, as I'm sure staff is aware, to make it, push the envelope a little bit each time. So it's something that is very important to us, obviously, as a Special District Association. I think the best way to really like to put it as well is that transparency allows for accountability in special districts. And of course, that's what all the business of you guys and all of us are in as well, and we as your advocate too. And that's one of the things I just want to kind of summarize as well too. One of the reasons that we really appreciate you guys doing this is because CSDA is an advocate for special districts in the state capitol and increasingly in Washington, D.C. too. And as you might expect, there's, can be a lack of knowledge of special districts and about what they do and services. Do they follow all these laws? And when we have districts such as you guys who go through our programs, take that next step, it sure makes our job a lot easier in those arenas advocating on your behalf, because we can say, particularly if there's new requirements that are coming up, we can say, look, we have districts that are already going above and beyond and, meeting what they're supposed to be doing and then some, and, being good stewards and, being accountable to their communities, doing that outreach that's all necessary. So I just wanted to make that point. I appreciate the opportunity just to kind of add that a little bit because it is so important to us. And as someone who works a lot in the legislative arena, myself now and in a previous life, I see the impacts of it. So with that, Mr. Chair and the board, I will go ahead and do the formal presentation just to once again congratulate South Tahoe Public Utility District on earning the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence for Construction. So thank you so much. Congratulations once again.
Can we get a picture? Will the board stand up and we'll... Yeah. Huddle up down there.
Where do you want us?
There we go. Perfect. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, and we're skipping item 7, so let's go to item 8, standing in ad hoc committee.
I have nothing.
You want to cover off?
Sure, I can start. Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, we had operations committee on Tuesday of this week, and had a lot to discuss. Summer is a busy season for our staff and our crews, and got some good news about a grant for the El Dorado County fire hydrants. So we're going to continue some fire hydrant installs in the county. I think that's a great program that's been working very well for a very important issue of firefighting. And there's also a lot of work being done on blow-offs at cul-de-sacs, which is cool because those are coming up as little miniature like fire hydrants. While they don't have the fire flow of a true fire hydrant, they can still be used in case of an emergency. So I think, while that's an operational kind of project for us, it can also serve the community in terms of potential fire suppression. So a couple other things. I'll let Shane's got the detailed notes, so I'll let him go ahead and round that out.
I guess we wanted to give a shout out to staff for knocking out the Pope Beach pump station, basically getting those pumps back online like ahead of kind of the big tourist season, so that was a big deal. Just the other thing, it sounds like our water leaks are starting to pipe up a little bit here. Chris had indicated things are starting to go, keeping us pretty busy. I know I had one of the pipes on my street actually went up, and they turned around and got it fixed really quickly. So good job there. I guess the other thing we hit on a bit, and that's what we talked sort of about, was item that was going to be moved on to the next board meeting, so maybe I won't hit on that too hard. And then I guess the other place of interest is that we let a request for proposals out on a water supply master plan. Mark walked us through that a little bit, so that's something that's going to help us better identify kind of our current future needs as it relates to water. And let's see, I guess another point just as it relates to the blow off, it kind of equates to about another 200 kind of fire hydrants around. And then the grant itself is installing 13 different hydrants in the county. What else? Just some other stuff that's just popping up as they're getting out and inspecting tanks and things like that. Some repairs are going to be needed. We did talk a bit about more strategic planning surrounding some of our pump stations and making sure we have backup parts ready to go. And so like we're not beholden to any kind of delays and getting the equipment we need to bring things back online in a rapid way. And so that might be something that we'll be bringing forward and very likely be more specifically outlined in the capital improvement program. So I don't know if there's anything else I missed. You good? No, it's all good? Yeah, okay. Other committees? That's all. Yes.
Very good. El Dorado Water Agency held a board meeting on the 12th, and it was actually kind of a meaty meeting. We did pass the budget for the year, $13 million budget, and it's an odd meeting because the budget was very programmatic. It's quite unlike the budget process that we go through here. There are no committee meetings, no detail. The most detail they give you are a couple of pages on the conferences they're going to go to. So out of a $13 million budget, they amplify about $150,000 of it in 4-page detail, but the $13 million collapsed to a single page. So it's a very odd budget. The board is dominated by the Board of Supervisors members. There are 3 of them out of the 5 voting board members. So basically they carry policy. We also approved a consultant list, a list of contracts that was 3 pages long, single-spaced line items of consultants. So we don't discuss consultant contracts on an individual basis. It's just a programmatic approval of the whole list that the GM puts together. And I objected to that, but nobody else was interested in my objection to that. But odd process. We had evaluated the GM in closed session. That was a good process. But I did let the board know that that I was not running for South Tahoe PUD board, and so I will be off their board as well. And one of the things that's coming up is they're going to be updating the strategic plan for the agency. And it's nominally done every 5 years, so it was not done on the 4 years that I was on the board. So I was living with somebody else's strategic plan for the entire time. The priorities for spending and everything, those are set by somebody prior, or a board prior. And so they're just starting the process now, and my thinking is we should probably nominate somebody from this board that's going to stay on to take over from me before the end of this year so that they can be part of that process. So if you all will think about that, and then maybe next meeting we can talk about substituting the board member for that board. I think that'd be a good idea. Yeah. Back to the budget, $13 million budget, and $400,000 of that is designated for South Tahoe PUD. So what's that percentage? It's very low. Paul, at one point you told me approximately what our tax, or what percent that South Tahoe PUD customers pay in property taxes toward El Dorado County's budget. It was a fairly large percentage, as I recall.
I don't know what the percent is. I'm guessing in today's dollars, it would be about $700,000 that this community contributes to the agency. $700,000 in property taxes? Yes. Okay, that's a lot less than I thought it was. So
I was thinking we were like a fairly high percentage of their whole taxable income, but not so.
I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe that, I don't know if that data is available, if we can get that, but it would be nice for the next board member to go into these kind of things saying, you know, wait a minute, if we're 5% of your revenues, we ought to get 5% of the benefits back. But most of the benefits are going to the West Slope, American River Basin programs, and the strategic plan ought to reflect more spending in the Tahoe Basin.
I think it used to be worse. This is an improvement, but whether you think it or not, that it is, I think it's in date in years past, it was much worse.
Well, very good. Well, we'll continue to improve. So maybe next time we can put that on the agenda to have the board appoint somebody else.
Okay.
Or does the president appoint them? No?
Yeah, the board has to approve it.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, yeah.
I was just curious on our involvement in the strategic planning and the previous version of it. How do we, or how, to what extent is our staff engaged on that, and like how much input can we provide, or is it pretty close door?
Kelly, maybe you can.
It was just like you said, it was not a real intricate process. It was just kind of like, well, I would call it almost like consensus. And it was pretty cut and dry.
Just the nature of that organization is it's the general manager controls and orchestrates a lot.
That's what I was just
and
that was when it was campaign?
Yeah.
Campaign.
Right. The new GM is a lot more collaborative. I think she's, Rebecca Gould is, she's new, but she had a great first year, and I think she's a lot more open to more collaboration. So, but that just like this consultant list was, in my view, ridiculous. To approve a 3-page single-spaced line item of consultants, and it totaled like $10 million, and there's a lot of money going out to consultants, and we didn't discuss any line item at all. It was just approved. So,
well, I'm just looking at this RFP for water supply master plan, and it seems, or my understanding, is currently an unfunded item, and that might be a great place to land itself in that strategic plan. That's what I'm trying to get at. Us being a bit more forceful and communicating what our needs are, and more specifically how that money can be spent here.
yeah.
Are you volunteering, Shane?
Yeah, no, I'm actually looking at it.
We have reformed the meeting process, so we don't have to drive down there every time. We, as a regular practice, we notice the meeting both down in El Dorado Hills and in our conference room. So the public can attend either place, and the directors can attend either place. So that works out good. We don't have to drive down the hill. So,
A lot of times you were in the car longer than you were.
yeah, and in the wintertime, that's a tough drive to make. So, okay. So that's item 8. Do we have any board member reports under that?
Do not.
Shane? None? Okay. We're going to get done with this before Nick Exline shows up. Okay, let's go to staff and attorney reports. Start with the ledge update. Shelley.
Good afternoon. I wanted to provide a legislative and regulatory update. So I'll start with the best news first. So last year we submitted an earmark request for a Pioneer Trail water line, and when Congress finally, all of our representatives added it to the list, and when Congress finally did pass a spending bill, it included $1 million for our community to build that water line on Pioneer Trail. So that was fiscal year 24. So this year, the request for earmarks went out again. There were 9 projects submitted from the California side of Lake Tahoe, including our Park Avenue water line project. This is down by State Line. And of the 9 Tahoe projects, only 2 projects made it on all 3 representatives' list, and that includes us and Tahoe City Public Utilities District's projects, which is really exciting that of all the projects that were submitted to Congressman Kiley and Senators Butler and Padilla, that our project made all 3 of their lists. So a big thank you to our representatives. We sent them thank you letters last week for prioritizing this important work. And just a big thanks to our lobbyists as well, who have done a really exceptional job of helping us build these relationships with our federal delegation. So as a reminder, this doesn't mean we're for sure going to get fiscal year 25 earmarked money. It's a long road ahead for Congress to pass a budget bill with 1,000 opportunities for things to be cut. But out of the whole state of California, it's exciting to know that we're on the list. At the state level, we're still working on SB 1088. This is a bill that we worked with Senator Alvarado Gil to write. It expands the Cal OES Hazard Mitigation Grant Program to include grant funding for water infrastructure for fire suppression projects, which is currently not eligible for grant funding through the state. The funding mechanism for this bill, if passed, comes out of the climate bond, so which we think is going to be on the November ballot. So the Assembly and the Senate have very different climate bond packages right now, and they are negotiating to determine the final dollar amount and what funding areas will be cut or kept. So I've been down in Sacramento a few times meeting with our different Senate and Assembly members, highlighting the importance of both SB 1088, which everybody seems in support of that bill, but the harder part is making sure that the funding in the climate bond for that grant program stays in. So I will keep you posted as the bill and the bond continue to make it through the very long legislative process. On the regulatory side of things, the Department of Water Resources continues to implement the new regulations for making conservation a California way of life. And throughout this regulatory process, the district has volunteered to be a pilot for when they were developing the outdoor landscape requirements. We had concerns about our dense canopy coverage and that aerial imagery. For developing a seasonal population variance. We were one of 2 water agencies that shared all of our data, as well as the water loss standards. And what we've learned is that being part of that development process, working really closely with the state, ensures that Tahoe's unique both climate and population are accounted for on these statewide mandates and programs. So the next step in this, what feels like never-ending process, is that the law directs the Department of Water Resources to conduct a study to figure out the benefits and impacts associated with the indoor residential standards. So this starts at 52 gallons per person per day and ratchets down every few years. So the legislature said, hey, DWR, you need to do a study to make sure that these numbers you came up with, that Californians can comply with at not an astronomical cost. So DWR has contracted with Flume, which is a private company that's been around for a while, and they're working together to look for water agencies to pilot this study. So the water conservation team at the district is interested in being one of the pilots, as there's no upfront cost to the district or to our customers outside of minimal staff time. And we think that our population, because we're not all full-time residents, because of this mix of full-time, second homeowners, and vacation rentals, tells a very different story than what you might find in Sacramento and LA. So to be a part of this study, how it would work is we would work with Flume to invite customers to volunteer to receive a free Flume device. Flume says the ideal threshold is 100 people to say yes. And what a Flume is, oh, excuse me, it's about this big, and it's got a rubber band. It's like a big smart watch that you open your meter box and you strap it onto the meter. And how it works is the device connects to the homeowner's internet, and as the meter spins, the flume tracks water flow every minute. And homeowner has a, they're more of a tech company, has a super easy to use app that shows the water usage. And so this is very granular data, and it's different than what we currently are doing with our AMI and our smart meters. AMI, our current water smart portal, customers can view water usage every hour. That's how frequently it pings the towers, whereas this is every minute. So our algorithms can tell customers if they're irrigating or not. The flume can tell you when your dishwasher turned on, clothes washer turned on, toilet flushed, whatnot. So for the folks that volunteer and want to get a free flume device, they would agree to share 5 years of historical building data and take a survey. Flume does we help them come up with the list, but Flume does all the support for that. And the data collected from flumes across the state, they're trying to do this statewide, would be compiled into a report to the Department of Water Resources to determine how much indoor water use is occurring in different properties across the state to check that indoor water use number that was developed. So any questions or comments from the board about moving forward with being a pilot for this study?
What are our costs?
There's no upfront cost to us. There's no cost to us other than some staff time. For the customers, it's free, but what Flume has found out is that for a customer who wanted to volunteer to be a part of it, they would be charged $25, and once they got the Flume and installed it, they'd get the $25 credited back to their credit card. And that's mainly what Flume has found, is that you want people to have a little bit of skin in the game to make sure they do the fun. It's no use sending someone a Flume if they don't put it on the device and get it connected.
Would staff be responsible for soliciting the 100?
So, good question, Nick. So we would definitely help with that because the new iPearl meters that we have don't work with Flume. So we're developed, if you're okay with it, we would compile a list of all of the older meters in our system that do work with Flume. We'd like it to be geographically dispersed throughout our service area. Since the study's looking for 100 participants, we would reach out to more than 100 participants, maybe 200. But the customers would sign up through Flume. Flume would send the product directly to them to install, and we would more be on the back end if folks can't find their meter box and need some help with things like that.
So did we get a solicit, get that mix, second homeowner?
Totally.
Because otherwise it's
right.
The point of it's all full-time residents.
Agreed. I think you want different neighborhoods, different types of customers, exactly.
Depending how the vacancy tax vote goes in November, if that is successful, I can't imagine a second homeowner that would sign up for this. Just because they would not want that granular information collected on their property. But nevertheless, if this doesn't cost anything, and what's the benefit to us?
So something that I have learned with the state is that the water agencies that normally participate in the studies are bigger water agencies in more urban and suburban areas. And so I don't know if South Lake Tahoe residents use more or less indoor water use. I don't know if vacation homes or full-time residents use more water use. But I want to make sure that our rural mountain communities' usage isn't neglected or not considered when compared to Sacramento, LA, and Bay Area, where there will be a lot of data coming in from the urban hubs.
And we don't have any data currently that to break out what's indoor and outdoor, right? We can't do that currently.
We don't, our WaterSmart data does on a lot by lot parcel, the algorithms in WaterSmart can say, you know, we see that it looks like your irrigation system turned on these days at this time and ran for X amount of time. But there's no easy way to back out the data to figure out indoor and outdoor use on a daily basis or weekly basis. It's more just holistically, we know that our water production doubles in summer months, and the difference between summer and winter is outdoor landscape irrigation.
Yeah, we measure the flow over Luther Pass and down to Diamond Valley, right? So we've got a total in, total out, so we could be able to tell, you know, if you just averaged it. We could come up with that number, but we just can't tell what an individual house does.
It's just so much data. I'm sure we could if we had unlimited amount of time and resources to do it.
I'm assuming that like Flume would kind of be responsible for laying out the sampling design and like figuring out which customers are in fact permanent residents versus permanent. And all that. Are we going to dig into that? Or?
Yeah, we don't have that information. We don't have that data on file who's permanent and who's not. But the thought is, if we look at what meters are eligible to have a flume, and we select X amount per neighborhood and reach out to, send letters, then it's up to customers if they're interested in participating. And I think that just inevitably you'll get some full-time residents, some second homeowners, some BHRs, and we'll just have to, we won't know going into it what percentage we get out.
The data will reveal it.
Yeah, no, I'm all about data. I think it's good.
The second homeowners are likely to have their irrigation on the timer.
Yeah.
But their indoor use will be absolutely zero when they're there, but they're not there. And that goes for full-time homeowners that live here. Mm-hmm. So if they're absent, they're on vacation or something like this, it's going to show zero. So, there's always a concern when you leave town that somebody's going to know somehow. Because it's open season on robbing your house. So hopefully this data is not accessible through some portal, to the general public, right?
Right. There's a data sharing agreement that I sent to Ryan to have legal look at if we're moving forward with this. And it's just, for us, the data that would be shared is the if somebody agrees to participate, it's the 5 historical years of water use data. So how much water did you use every month or every quarter for the last 5 years? And the data agreement has very specific language for who can look at it and what it can be used for. And so by the time it gets to the state, it's this aggregated data over the whole state of California, not, this address in South Lake Tahoe.
Can you just clarify, so you said it was like 5 years worth of historical data, like what's the duration of the data collection?
This study is a 1-year study. Yeah. Right.
So you're looking for, I guess, board consensus to move forward with this or not to move forward?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily looking for a vote, but just wanted to get a gut check from you all if you're comfortable with us moving forward with this. Will you go?
Anybody uncomfortable?
Okay.
Guess we're good.
Awesome. And then last thing is just on Tuesday night, we hosted our second of 3 gardening workshops here in the boardroom, and it was very well attended with 35 people joining us. The theme was blooming through summer, so how to plant pollinators, flowers, shrubs that bloom throughout the season. And our final workshop of the season will be at the end of August, talking about preparing your gardens for fall. So 35 people. I mean, can you believe it?
That's a good number.
Yeah, that's it.
For our meeting.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. So let's go to Senate Bill 1439, training.
Yes, thank you, President and board members. I'm Ryan Jones, a Deputy General Counsel for the district. So we thought this would be relevant. This is a relatively new law. Came about 18 months ago, but we're getting into election season, so we thought it would be helpful to brief the board on this because it does relate to campaign contributions, and maybe you may be solicited for some of those coming up. So it was effective as of, I don't know who's covering this slide. So the next slide, please. Do I have it?
Oh, you stay there.
Appreciate it. So yeah, like I mentioned, about a year and a half ago, this came into effect as a law, and it only impacts campaign contributions in excess of $250. And it does now, as the second bullet mentioned, apply to you all, to elected officials. So next slide. Here's what it is. The short version is that a donor who has a matter pending before the board, the best example would be a contractor, right? Somebody who wants to do work for the district, and maybe they're going to do a capital improvement project. If they have a matter coming up within 12 months of having made a contribution of over $250 to any one of you, you cannot vote on their item. So if you are one of the, let's say you did, it doesn't mean you can't accept the donation, you just can't then vote on their matter. So if you got a donation of $500, it does say that you have to publicly disclose that and then recuse yourself from the boardroom. And then you also can't influence the decision anyway, such as try to tell your colleagues that this is something we should vote on. It also says the donor must disclose contribution too. So if they're coming before the board, they would say, I need to make the board aware that I did make a campaign contribution to Director so-and-so in excess of the $250. It also applies to 12 months after the decision. So for example, my contract was on the agenda this afternoon and you voted for it, and the next day I gave all of you $500 campaign contribution, that would be impermissible. I can't do that. I could in theory, I guess, give you $249, that's less, but that's maybe not the most transparent and way we want to operate around here. But the law says there is a time period of 12 months after I've had a decision or an item before the board where you cannot make campaign contributions. Yes, sir.
And Ryan, most of the time, the business that comes before the board is with corporations, say Carollo Engineers, something like that. Does this apply to individuals that work for that company, or is this an official donation from Carollo Engineers? Okay.
Yeah, it has to come from an officer, somebody who has, if it's just an individual, no, it does not. You know, the other question I thought was, what about ratepayers? Ratepayers have items coming before you, you raise rates. It doesn't apply to them. It's got to be somebody who has a real vested interest, such as the owner of the company. Corporations is really not going to, unless you're the CEO, it's not going to be relevant to that person. Good question. Next slide. So what kind of decisions are we talking about? The first two bullets really don't apply to the district. You don't have a lot of land use entitlements that you're giving. The third one is what we're talking about. I would say it's employment, well, not so much employment, but capital improvement contracts. When you have a contractor doing work, or maybe a laborer like myself, or engineers or other outfits who do work for the district on a private basis and have a contract, that's the type of action we're talking about that the board would be impacted. Thank you. The last one. So if you don't have actual knowledge or should have known, in theory you get a get out of jail free card. I wouldn't rely on that. I think you should be aware of who's making contributions and who is coming before the board for action items. But let's say something did come up. This is items 2 and 3, how you have exceptions. If you got a contribution, you didn't realize that within 12 months they were going to come before the board and you'd like to vote on it, you can't give the money back. You have to give the money back within 30 days of either being aware that you got the money or 30 days of being aware that they're about to come before the board for an action item. And then secondarily, the last bullet is if they do the contribution after you've already taken action, you only have 2 weeks or 14 days to return the contribution and not have an issue with it.
So Ryan, the within 30 days of when something's going to come up, I guess as a practical matter, we see the agenda week and a half tops ahead of when it comes before the board. Is that an acceptable period of time to return the money? And
it is. It's more than that. Yes. And sometimes you may not even realize till the person is standing right here. And, or maybe, a lot of times they don't come here, but you see the contract on the agenda and you think, oh, you know what, I did get accepted contribution. That could be the point where you call a timeout. And maybe you consult with us as legal counsel how to deal with it, but you could recuse yourself at that point too. This is SB 1439. If you have any follow-up questions, we're here to answer them. Certainly, your legal counsel is here as individual stuff comes up. We don't have to address it in front of everybody if you don't like, but we're here to help and make sure we're following the laws and being transparent. Because I want to get that word again from where that.
any questions, board members? Thank you, Ryan. Okay, let's go on to the GM report. Item 1.
Ryan's got a quick report he wants to give. Ryan Lee.
Good afternoon, Ryan Lee, Customer Service Manager. I had just a couple of quick updates for the board today. One of the things that I wanted to update you on is we had spoken kind of at length over the last couple meetings. It's come up about our customer assistance program and how we're looking to expand that. So we had a great discussion at the last board meeting, got some good feedback from the board. Thank you for that. So the staff, we kind of revisited this, and I wanted to summarize what we're planning to bring back to you. So the customer assistance program is encoded in the administrative code, so it will take an ordinance to amend it. We are looking at bringing that ordinance to the board at the next board meeting in July, which I believe will be the one on the 18th, since we're planning to cancel the first one on the 3rd. So I wanted to just tell you what we're looking at including in that and get the final feedback from the board. So what we had talked about at the last meeting and the consensus had kind of come back around, we talked through different options and came back around to the idea that the board liked an income-based program, and we're looking at adding a tier to our kind of existing program so we could continue to use the framework that we have. But as a reminder, so our existing program is tied to Liberty Energy's CARE program, and the income guidelines for that program are codified by state law to be 200% of the federal poverty limit. So what we are looking at doing is adding an additional tier to the district's customer assistance program that would qualify anybody whose household income is up to 300% of that federal poverty limit for a 15% discount. So they would get a little less than the 25% that we give to the people who meet that lower income requirement, but they'd get a 15% discount. We like the idea of continuing to tie the income requirements to the federal poverty limit because it's automatically updated every year. So it takes effect June 1st every year. That is increased. And so it gives us something to kind of keep it all tied together with, and we liked that. We also talked about a funding cap for this new program, and what we're proposing is, and this won't be part of the code, but the board will set this and be able to change it at any time. We're proposing starting with a $50,000 annual funding limit for this tier of the program. So again, it wouldn't impact the number of people who would be able to enroll in the low income program, but this new tier that would be, that would cover a couple more people who don't meet that lower limit. We would fund that to $50,000, and we'll be able to track that. So when we set this up, we'll have different rate codes. We'll be able to track how many people are involved and how much that's costing the district, so we could provide updates to the board on, to try to gauge whether we're reaching that group of customers that we were hoping to reach with this. So I wanted to get the board's feedback on kind of how I just laid that out and whether you'd like to see that in an ordinance or whether there's any discussion or proposed changes.
Criteria we went over. So just so I'm clear, the 50,000 cap is just for the 300% tier. And what can you remind me what the cap is on the other tier?
Yeah, so currently on the other program, there's not a cap. So we've never set a funding limit to that. And right now, it's around $150,000 a year. So that will increase as enrollment increases and as the rates increase. But that's what it's been for the last couple of years, right around $130,000 to $150,000.
So just a comment, I appreciate you giving us the pre-warm-up for it coming to the board next time. I think it's really helpful for us to kind of think about it a bit more. And then I guess for me, just for clarification and understanding, so if you're up to the 200% poverty level, you get a 25% break. There's another tier for those people that are kind of in that margin between 200 and 300%. And for those people that kind of fall in that area, they would get a 15% rate reduction.
Correct.
Okay.
And we talked about having that be a self-certification. We were planning to do that kind of similar to how Liberty's doing it, so that we're not taking any of that income verification documentation and having to store it somewhere. And just so to give you a guideline of what this means in dollars is right now, it just took effect June 1st of this year. The current federal poverty limit, or 200% of that for a household of 1 to 2, is $40,800. So that would be $61,000 this year. For a household of 1 to 2, household of 3, it'd be go from $51,000 to $77,000 household income. In a household of 4, it would go from $62,000 to $93,000. So I think we're hoping that will reach the customers that we heard a lot from during the Prop 218 process this year.
So the $50,000 cap, how do you administer that? Is it just first come, first serve, and you cut it off?
Correct. That's what we're envisioning.
And because it's a percentage of their bill, I guess this is water and wastewater combined, right? Wastewater is fixed. You can estimate that pretty well, to the penny. But water is a variable amount, so I guess you'll shoot for $50,000, but it may be a little more, a little less.
That's what I would think, is that we'll use it as our guideline, that's what we're aiming for, and then we would suspend admission or enrollment in the program when we get to it, or we'll let the board know too. If we have a lot of people enroll in this and we're getting close to that area, we will bring it back to you and see what you think. You'd always have the opportunity to raise or lower that funding limit.
And then is there like an annual enrollment, open enrollment, where everybody has to line up, an enrollment period. So somebody gets aced out, they're the 60th household, and they're out this year. But do they have another chance next year to get in that?
Yeah, we haven't talked through how that would work with our current program. We just allow rolling enrollment, and I would think we would do that with this one too, unless we maybe get close to that limit, and then we'd be looking at. And we'll do something where just like with our current program, where every 2 or 3 years, you will need to recertify that you still meet those income requirements. So there will be some movement. There always is. The other limit that we talked about is that we're going to require that this be your primary residence. So we see a lot of people with our existing program. We do keep an eye on that. If we have somebody who's on our customer assistance program whose mailing address changes to an out-of-town mailing address, we will confirm with them that they still reside there, or perhaps they're moving out of town or something like that, and they'll no longer qualify for the program.
Okay. Yeah. Think about that. How you administer it year over year, because I could see somebody finding out about the program, and they're toward the lower end of that income. They're $40,900, or something, and yet they're not in the program, but somebody who's making $90,000 is. And it seems like, after it rolls over after 1 year, those people at the lower end should have a better chance of getting into the thing. I don't know. Think about it, just so that they're not, the same list doesn't get rolled from year to year. It doesn't become an entitlement on those who just happen to get in the boat the first time this thing was offered.
Yeah, good point. We'll put some thought into that and bring you some ideas on that when we come back with the ordinance. Okay, thanks. We'll bring that in July, and thank you to the board for all your engagement on this one. I think the customers will be pleased. Okay, and then the other update that I had for you, I wanted to talk a little bit about some new EPA regulations that are going to impact the district in regards to lead and copper in water service lines. So I'll give you this will be an interesting presentation. It's going to be kind of a first introduction for you, and we'll keep you going as we move through this process, but I'll give you the information that we have as of today. So a little bit of background. The EPA has had long-standing lead and copper rule regulations that go back to the early 90s. And they most recently revised those in 2021, and they're in the process of revising them again right now. So what they've done in the past, these rules have primarily been that have required the district to do some testing for lead and copper throughout the year, and then every 3 years we do a series of testing at actual homes throughout our service area. So we're looking for homes built during a certain time period, and we test their water at the tap essentially for lead and copper. And what we have done, or where the lead normally comes from, we do see it every once in a while in those sampling at the homes. And it's not coming from the service line, but it's coming from fixtures inside the home that have lead or copper. So you do this test first thing in the morning after the water has sat overnight. And if there are fixtures containing lead, it can leach that lead into the standing water. Typically, once you flush it in the morning, even if you have lead fixtures in your home, we see those levels go away. So what has changed in the new EPA regulations currently require that we need to take an inventory of all of our service lines, and we've never done this before. The state has required since 2016, required us to certify whether or not we know of any lead in our system, and we don't. We don't believe that there are any lead services. They're not common in California. Lead services have been banned at the state level since 1986, but not commonly used long before that. So what the new requirements are is that we have until October 16th of this year to submit to the state an inventory of every one of our water service lines. And the tricky part that came with this new version of these regulations is that the EPA wants us to inventory separately the district side of the service and the customer side of the service. And what they're looking for is for us to report what the material of that service line is. So, in the past, the state requirements have always focused primarily or exclusively on the district side. So this is going to be the side from the main line in the street to the meter, where the district's responsibility ends. We have quite a few records on what the service line materials are for some of those. But on the customer side, we've never really tracked that because the district doesn't own it. It's a customer's asset. But the new requirement is that we inventory that along with our portion of the service. So this is a little complicated, but let me go through it step by step. This year, we have to submit the inventory with every single service line in our system, customer and district side, and the material if we know it. If we don't know the material, we have to state that it is unknown. If we state that the material of the service is unknown, the regulations require that we assume that they could be lead. So what this means for us is that, yes, and this is frustrating in many levels, but what it's going to look like for the district is that once we submit that to the state by October 16th at the latest, we have 30 days to notify all of our customers who have a known lead service line or an unknown material on the district side or the customer side. We have to send them a letter notifying them that their service line material is unknown and could possibly be lead. So that is the requirement that's going to hit us first, is just the notification. Now, as part of these updated regulations, we're required to replace any lead services that we find within 10 years. And so where we're at right now, and what the EPA recommends and the state recommends, is that we first mine through any data that we have on what services we have a known material for. So that's what we're doing. We're filtering based on the date that we know houses were built and things like that. Anything after 1986, we can definitively say that it doesn't have any lead in it, or at least the service line's not made of lead. And so we're going through the documentation that we have now. We're going to see what we can eliminate off of that list of unknown materials. And we have most recently what the information, or the best information that we have, is when we did our meter project over the last 15 years or so, we had a sheet for each property that the contractor was completing out in the field, where there was a section on that form to write down what the material was on the district side and the customer side. So we had all of these handwritten forms, and we just sent them out recently to a company that we've worked with in the past, who scanned all of those in and basically performed character recognition on them, so that we now have a digital data on what those forms say. So right now we're working on bringing that into a database of all of our services, and we're going to see how many we know. But it's going to be, we had about 6,000 of these meter sheets, so we didn't have one for every single meter that we installed, and some of those were missing. The portion of the form that pertains to that was blank. So what we're doing right now is going through that to see where we're at. I believe that this year we will be notifying thousands of customers that their service line material is unknown. So what we're looking at this summer is really focusing on looking at the data that we have, compiling our inventory as good as we can get it with what we've got, and then I'm working closely with Shelley and with Paul on kind of getting ahead of the customer outreach and noticing that we're going to have to do to really give them some context, because the EPA has a lot of required language, and it's a little scary. Like I was saying, they tell you that in order, if the material is unknown, you have to state that it may be lead, but it's very unlikely. We've never found a lead service in our service area, and we don't believe that we have any. So the other portion of the regulation is that we have 10 years, like I said, to replace any of these services, and we have 7 years to finalize our inventory, meaning that we have to definitively get rid of any unknown materials. So the EPA gives you a couple ways of doing that. The preferred way is, historical records and building codes and plumbing codes and things like that that can eliminate swaths of these. We can say that, for sure those are not lead. The other thing we can do is predictive modeling. So EPA has passed requirements for this methodology to the state level, and the state has not finalized the California requirements yet. Right now they're saying they want those submitted on a case-by-case basis, but what that would allow us to do is take a series of known pipes and basically do some kind of predictive modeling, and as long as we have a 95% statistical confidence rate, we can eliminate perhaps big areas of the system. Something like, we've done a representative sample of this subdivision, it was built at the same time, we know that these pipes are not lead, we're going to say with 95% confidence that the rest of these are not lead. So that's a cost-effective way of doing this. The least cost-effective way of doing it is their preferred method, which is to dig it up and look at it. That's very expensive. So what we've seen also, so this is a federal EPA regulation, so there's a lot of money out there right now for different phases of this. I think it's going to end up, there's going to be a lot of money to get the lead service lines out. Right now, we're starting to see funding opportunities for this initial step of performing the inventory. So Danielle has been looking into those. We're not sure what will, how competitive we'll be for that at this point, but we're going to definitely pursue any money we can get toward essentially identifying our unknown materials. We have also looked at a tool that we can, there's a new tool designed specifically for this, where if you open a meter pit, you can kind of stick a probe down each side of the service line, and this will electrically tell you if there's lead in the service line. So we're looking into that. We've actually budgeted to acquire that tool in the new fiscal year, but we probably won't be using it this summer. That may be, starting next year, and it would require staff time to go out and do this. So what we're trying to do right now is wrap our heads around what we know, and then look at the rest of the unknowns and try to come up with the most cost-effective way of tackling that. We'll definitely need to, potentially use this tool or look at some of these, and then I think predictive modeling will be the most cost-effective way of doing it once we kind of figure out where we need to get some known quantities first. The other thing that we've seen a couple times, including recently, I read it in the paper about a month ago, Incline Village has asked their customers to assist with this. So EPA allows for basically, you can put out some outreach and some information on how the customers can crawl under the house and find where the water service comes in the foundation and identify the material themselves. And then most of the places I've seen doing this are requiring a photo of it. So basically, it's really easy to tell if you have a copper pipe or galvanized steel. And so that's another thing that we could do, is kind of engage our customers in helping us eliminate some of those unknowns. Again, this will be happening all over the country. California, I think what I've read is that they believe that California has the fewest lead service lines back on the East Coast. There are tens of thousands of these pipes made of lead. It's crazy. But in California, we think we have far fewer. The only other thing that's coming up, so there's like I said, they're revising the rules again right now, and it's out for public comment. They're not finalized yet, but are expected to be finalized this year. And the new set of rules, we will have 3 years to comply with. There's some different noticing and testing requirements, but the most impactful thing in that new set of rules is that it's going to include lead connectors. So these are, they call them pigtails or goosenecks or whips. So this is like there's a material or a section of pipe that connects the service line to the main line. In the past, those were commonly made of lead. Typically in California, it sounds like that hasn't been a real big thing since the 1930s, but we have heard that they are talking about looking at parts that contain lead, and that could be problematic. We do have some pigtails that connect our services to the mains that we've installed even in recent times that have lead components. They comply with California state law about what percentage of lead is in them, but that would be potentially problematic. Right now, it looks like they're mainly focusing on solid lead pigtails, though. So, any questions at this point?
So I just to clarify that EPA is going to comes with funding to do this inventory.
No. So there's just a lot of funding out there. They set aside, I think, $15 billion, and the feedback that they're getting en masse right now is basically that it's nowhere near enough. We're seeing the same thing with the most recent kind of PFAS regulations, where the amount that they estimated this would cost on a national level seems greatly underestimated. And so, yeah, there's a lot of funding that's coming out about this. It's a big push from the White House. And so they really are focusing on getting the lead service lines out. And like I said, there is some funding on this first piece of just identifying unknown materials. But what Danielle had thought she'd seen so far is that since California has basically stated that we don't think we have many of these, they have aimed the funding away from us. So in the first round of funding, California got a certain amount of money, and then in the next round, it was like a tenth of that, because the state said that we don't have any of these. And there's a lot of criticism. NRDC has been greatly critical of that, basically because the state of California has never required that we report on the customer side. And that's potentially where more of the lead would be. Again, we don't think we have any here. It's just most of our community is built after the 1930s was kind of the end of that. Early 1900s was when we were seeing lead. So they said basically in the 1800s up through like 1910, there were lead service lines, and typically those were phased out in California after that, even though it wasn't illegal until 1986.
So if kids already gone ahead and reached out to the customers and asked them to kind of self-certify, take a picture, and then that to me seems like a way, kind of a cost-effective way of getting at answering some of these questions. I'm glad to see that they're allowing at least that side of things, because I can tell you right now, using my house is copper, but I think most people that own a home and have had to deal with, fixing a leak or whatever, probably know exactly what's going on. So.
Yeah, and we can do that too. Really, I mean, we're set up to do that. That's something that I think goes a long way. You might as well do it and see what you get back. But I think we should build our inventory first so that we focus on those people. We'll set up, we have, the Laserfish forms that you've probably heard about. It works great. There's a public-facing module to that too, where we could have somebody just go on the website, they could fill out their address, upload a photo, and then we have all of this in a database, and it can kind of feed right into our catalog as and we'll QC it and make sure everything looks good. But yeah, once we approve it, it'll just go straight in there. But first, I think we'll figure out which ones are known and unknown so that that form would only be available to those people who have an unknown material.
Ryan, you said we have 10 years to firm up our inventory, or 7 years to firm up the inventory and 10 years to replace all. Are those, is it 7 years followed by 10, or is it?
Yeah, it runs concurrently. So basically, yeah,
3 years past.
And what they're trying to do is get you to identify your lead pipes first so that you have enough time to replace them. So they're really telling these people who potentially have a lot of these that they want them to start replacing them on a yearly basis. There are rules regarding that in the new set of regulations to basically of like, if you know about them, you now have to replace a certain amount of them every year, even if your inventory is not finalized yet. But like I said, we've never found one. We've spoken to local plumbers. They've never seen one. So we're really hoping that we don't have them up here, but it would be helpful. I mean, it would, in one sense, it would be helpful to find one so that we would know where it came from and what kinds of things we might be looking to find more. I don't know that there are any, but we're just in the dark now. We don't think we have any.
Yeah, so I guess if we did find one or more, and I can imagine old historic cabins could be candidate, but if we did, for the district to go replace a private service line, it means we have to go on private property, and we got to go right up to their house, right? So we don't have the right to do that. Or do we? Do we condemn that right? Or do we have to get some sort of a, right of entry signed by that owner or what? I guess we probably not have to think about that legally. We've got a lot of time to do this, it sounds like, but that's one of the things on the path. I was going to ask you if you or anybody else has tried to figure out about what this is going to cost us per year over the next 10 years.
We haven't looked at it yet, and it's hard to say because we're not sure how many unknowns we have and how many that we're going to have to, actually visit in the field. So we're kind of looking at it from this angle of there are these different ways that the regulations allow you to certify what the material is, and so we want to do as many of these as we can in the cheaper ways so that we minimize the amount that we have to actually go out and visit, but we just don't know at this point. I think once we do our initial inventory, then we can map these and we'll see, I think the next step may be to see how far we can get with predictive modeling or basically what the modeling would require, how many knowns, and then we can map those. So we're looking at verifying a representative sample. That's going to be the most expensive part of this for the district for sure. It's the ones we actually have to go out and touch somehow. So I think we'll know more information after we get this initial inventory together and we start doing that. I think what we're looking at is doing a lot of that work over this next coming winter season where we can really start mapping this out and figure out, where do we need to go out and look at, and at the same time we could look at rolling out something on the customer side to help us identify additional services. But I think the way we're kind of doing it is going in order, but at this point I don't know how many or what it will cost or a good way to estimate that.
Wasn't the estimated cost of the tool that probes the service lines, wasn't it like $80,000?
Yeah, the tool costs $80,000. The company that makes it, it's ElectroScan, so they've been around a long time. They're actually headquartered in Sacramento, which is nice. So we got to send staff down there to see a demo. The tool costs $80,000. One person can operate it. ElectroScan claims that they think a good estimate of how many of these you could do in a day is somewhere between 12 and 15. So it's the staff time along with the cost of the tool. And so we're looking at different options. We've budgeted for that tool. Like I said, we haven't ordered it yet. And we're kind of just trying to get ahead of this and wrap our heads around what we're going to need to be doing here.
That sounds like you're in the narrowing phase and kind of, that's good. Approaching it as efficiently as possible.
So if we went that route and purchased the tool, it sounds like based on that estimate of how many a person could do in a day, we would have to use a seasonal for a few seasons, to get through the remaining inventory.
Yeah. That number is,
And I'm just curious, like, when does this thing hit the Federal Register?
So the the one that has the noticing requirement actually hit in 2021, it was finalized. And then they're finalizing the new ones now. And so this is basically the year that the catalog is due. And they started the most recent rulemaking period started last December. So that's when we started really engaging with it because it had, they were proposing some changes from how we've been reporting to the state since 2016.
My. Okay. This is one of these global mandates that the benefit cost it makes sense for Detroit. It does not make sense for South Lake Tahoe. This is, it's been imposed on us as just part of the U.S. Let's just do it to the whole country. But the benefits of this thing compared to the cost, kind of ridiculous, but okay, appreciate the update.
And we'll keep you posted as we get more information and a better handle on this, and as we get closer to sending notifications out to the customers, we will let you know when we're, what we're thinking and how we're going to do that outreach, because I imagine you'll probably hear from people.
And if you do decide to get the probe and put somebody on that thing, imagine, if you could figure out a daily rate for that, you could probably farm them out to the other purveyors in town here, because they need to do the same thing. Lakeside, the Keys, are there any others? Lukens, you could probably farm that out. Okay.
Thank you.
Good news. Now we can do general manager report.
Just a very quick couple of reminders. Our employee recognition picnic is on the 10th, which is the next water meeting, so you'll be here, so you might be able to stop by. It's going to be right here in this room. No board meeting in 2 weeks. And other than that, I will be on vacation tomorrow and next week. So if anything comes up from the board that you need kind of urgently, you can go through Melanie, and Melanie will have the ability to get a hold of me.
Okay, sounds good. All right. The past and future meetings shown on the agenda, and with that, if there's no other open session business, we're going to go into closed session. Out of closed session, we have nothing to report.